me Inspector Gadget.
Okay, that is the Thursday show. I've always wanted to do that. We have Ben Shapiro today, Alex Epstein, Thursday live on the YouTubes. Glad to see you. Today, producing with me in video studio, as always, is Jared, who is not gay. Follow him on Twitter at NotGayJared. Me at Escrata with your comments, thoughts, Photoshops, stuff with my legal allegations. Show your own conclusions. Are we good?
We're good.
At G. Morgan Jr. Here.
Yes.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Inspector Gadget.
Inspector Gadget. Horrible motion picture. As a matter of fact, it was the kind of motion picture that was so bad it ruined the cartoon. It made you go back and look at the cartoon and say, I can't enjoy it.
Not anymore. You ruined it.
I can't!
You ruined it.
So we have you mediocre nothing. Matthew brought it. You call that a film? We have and then it was sequel was French Stewart. Oh, it doesn't get any worse. Alex Epstein, author of The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, and of course Ben Shapiro will be talking about Comey. I have a macro issue I want to get into today because I received an email from quite a few students saying, you know what, I feel as though this is something that comes up all the time in college. Can you help me out with that? So we'll talk about that. We have a lot of news to get to.
We do have a lot of news.
A lot of news, a lot of guests. But let's hit some news off the top. Texas bill. Now, there's a bill in Texas that just passed that could potentially keep transgenders out of high school sports. Of course, this has the left outraged. Because if this happens, what kind of a society would we be? We wouldn't have boys setting girls' track meet records or winning wrestling meets or this. It could be a chemical bomb, and that music makes it funny. That was Fallon Fox, male to female transgender who beats the hell out of women in a cage for a living. And this goes back to, it's one of those things where, again, because we read leftist websites all the time, I sit there and I just read the outrage. And I first read their outrage until I see what the bill is about. And it's more so targeting steroids, but because of hormone replacement therapy, which is really bad for people, it also would include that. And it's one of them, I go, okay.
It's a chemical advantage.
I didn't know we needed a bill for this.
What?
I didn't.
I guess so.
And it's only happening
Apparently.
in Texas. Yeah. And in California, they think we're the crazy ones. And they always say it's completely invalid. You know, it's just logically lazy to use the slippery slope argument. Yeah, look behind you. There's the slippery slope. Now, do me a favor, look in front of you. That's a 200-foot drop covered in KY.
I would not slide down that slide. No.
You don't know what's waiting for you at the bottom. Like a guess. AIDS! You're right! Hit and run. This happened again. Another news story. You don't read about this in the leftist websites, but a hit and run DUI injured a 6-year-old. So here's the kicker. The guy who committed the hit and run, he's already been deported 15 times as an illegal immigrant.
Come on.
This is not a joke. It's not a surprise to any of us who've known about these problems with repeat offenders at the border. And as a matter of fact, here's right now, for those who don't believe us, live footage of the American-Mexican border. We need to build that wall.
And not put a door.
No. It almost seems as though it would cost more budget to put that door in there.
Take the door out of the plans.
Seems superfluous. This is 2 stories right off the top, right away. It's the victim culture creating actual victims. Girls in high school getting the crap beaten out of them, not being able to compete in sports. And right here, we want to be kind to illegal immigrants. So what happens? DUI. These people come over and they commit crimes in record numbers, and so you see real victims. But it's not as politically expedient for the left today to care about the 6-year-old with the hit and run.
Can't vote, so.
Speaking of the left, BuzzFeed Yellow changed their branding. I guess, I don't know how long ago this happened. Pretty recent. BuzzFeed Yellow to Boldly.
Boldly.
They say it's the same content you know and love, just bolder. And that's their content. If you haven't been following BuzzFeed Yellow, they have 7 million subscribers on YouTube. It's namely social justice women just trying out things that they've never done before, like a Kardashian diet.
Shoes.
This one, the women of BuzzFeed wearing heels for the first time.
Oh, good Lord.
Next up on suggestions of lists for Boldy's chicks to try, not being a fat lesbian.
It's going to be tough.
Can that one be in the docket?
It's going to be tough.
The production value that needs, they're just
No.
working on it.
Yeah.
A lot of new hires.
It's like putting Clint Howard in prosthetics. You have to have someone who really knows what they're doing. So
We love you, Clint.
He's gonna call. Why are you joking about me like that? Betsy DeVos. This has been going on all week, so we'll talk about Comey with Ben Shapiro because we talked about it yesterday. For those who missed it, who weren't Mug Club members, go watch it. I'd rather hear what Ben has to say. I'm exhausted. But Betsy DeVos, this did you read about this earlier in the week?
Mm-hmm.
There was outrage over her giving a commencement speech. She was scheduled to, so students were protesting. It was graduating seniors at, I don't know how we pronounce it, is it Bethune-Cookman University in Florida?
Something like that.
Anyways, the speech happened anyway with Betsy DeVos. And this is how these members of higher learning reacted. Let's roll this clip.
Great honor and privilege.
So as you can see, they want to make their voices heard.
I am honored to become a wildcat.
And turning their
And
back
it's a
because
real
that's how
honor
adults
and
react.
privilege to be with you as we celebrate the Bethune-Cookman University class of 2017.
Let it never be said that they were disrespectful. How many times
Just
do you
ruined their
hear-
own graduation.
They ruined their own graduation.
good.
And how many times do you? I don't know if these people weren't officially Black Lives Matter. I don't think so. I don't want to misrepresent them. But obviously, of that ilk, how many times have we heard Black Lives Matter talk about wanting to start a conversation,
Yeah.
or a dialogue? Right?
That's the end of the conversation right there.
There is no. It's stopping a conversation.
Yeah.
And by the way, these kids are so ignorant. They have no. Let's say Betsy DeVos is not qualified for the job. She's not the most qualified person for the job.
Sure.
Okay, but let's get into her ideas. Her ideas, I don't know. These kids have no clue. She advocates for school choice. That's her biggest sin here. And do you realize that these kids from urban areas, from more poor areas of the United States, they stand to benefit the most from school choice, from attaching the voucher directly to the student? By the way, I'm still waiting. We've had an open call out. Anyone who wants to come on this show and make a compelling case against school choice, I'm all ears. Anyone, at any point. I've never heard it. Any of you?
None.
No.
Can any of you
Not
play
one.
devil's advocate?
I wouldn't know where to start.
Money for teachers unions because they care about the kids.
That's not devil's advocate.
Oh, crap. That
You have to believe it.
That
You have
was
to
my
commit
best
to it.
argument.
Speaking of college, along with college, another racist hoax at another college. This was a racist letter that was written about. It was in the news, allegedly including the N-word that was posted. But just like Mattress Girl and Poop Swastikas and the Duke lacrosse case, it turned out to be false. This one was at St. Olaf in Minnesota. Now, the president of the school confirmed that the note was not a legitimate threat. That's what he said. And then when pressed on, well, what do you mean by it was not a legitimate threat? The president said, the reason I said in my earlier note that this was not a genuine threat is that we learned from the author's confession that the note was fabricated. So in other words, the reason I said it wasn't, because it's not a real thing. It's not a real, it's a fake, it's a lie. And he says apparently it was a strategy to draw attention to concerns about the campus climate. Again, the ends justify the means here. Because apparently the concern was to draw attention to fake incidents of racism on college.
Check.
I don't exactly know how this works, but here to clear it up for us, I guess, is our on-the-ground Black Lives Matter college correspondent, Desmond Black. Desmond, tell us what's going on out there. Make sense of it for us.
Yes. Well, you have to understand that with this given situation, the ends justify the means because it served to draw awareness
I don't.
to the discrepancy in privilege in the systemic, overt discrepancy
Okay.
between white and black students, and it started a dialogue too.
Okay, that's what we always started a dialogue. Desmond, like this last time when you started a dialogue, we saw what happened in these cities like Baltimore, Ferguson. The dialogue didn't work out so well. Is this what you mean by starting a dialogue?
But that's an essay though.
That's an essay? What could you possibly be studying where this is accepted as a legitimate essay, Desmond?
My major is humanities
Okay.
with a minor in burning cop cars.
Okay, well, see, that seems to me like your problem is with your minor. Desmond, I certainly don't want to lump everybody in because we've had black guests on this show from the left and right who are able to make sound arguments, and I don't think that you represent all. I don't even think that you represent all of Black Lives Matter, but it seems that you personally, Desmond, are a piece of, little bit maybe a piece of shit.
Yes.
Okay.
No.
All right, Desmond, our Black Lives Matter correspondent. You'll be seeing a lot of him. Probably not in the future. Before we get to our guests, here's a topic I wanted to get into. You guys are mutes today? Literally, you're sitting there with like zero.
I was giving the floor to our guest.
What
right.
guest?
The guy you had on the phone, man.
Before
What the
that,
hell?
completely alone out
Been
here.
talking a lot.
Now it's like I feel like Robin watching his parents die in the trapeze act,
Talk about a victim
and then
mentality.
never working again.
Jeez.
Chris O'Donnell.
Warner Brothers jokes.
So, here's something. I got an email from a college student. I've had this quite a bit. I say, you know what? I'm on college campus, and our professors always talk about right-wing extremists. They always talk about how conservatives are extreme and how, some of them say they used to be conservative and the right wing left them. Particularly in the age of Trump, right-wingers are accused of being too extreme. And they've said, can you help us make the case that that's not true? I would actually argue the opposite. And I want to lay out the case for you today that everything from moderate left to the current Democratic Party, the DNC, they actually have a corner exclusively on the political extreme in the United States. As a matter of fact, I don't think that the right wing is such a big tent now. I don't think it's capable of being as extremist as the left. Certainly you can take maybe a 0.1% and attribute it, but I'm talking about as an actual platform. So, well, what do you mean? Okay, let me lay out a case for you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Let's take the big issues. Abortion. That's an issue, right? The right-wing extremists. By the way, right-wing extremists who've actually bombed abortion clinics, when they bring that out, you could count on both hands how many times that's actually happened. Single-digit numbers, okay? But, okay, most conservatives are pro-life. We'll give you that. We believe life begins at conception. But we're past that now. Roe v. Wade was passed. So let's look to the super extreme example of the Supreme Court, not nominee anymore, but Judge
Justice.
Gorsuch.
Had you ever met President Trump personally?
Not until my interview.
In that interview, did he ever ask you to overrule Roe v. Wade?
No, Senator.
What would he have done if he'd asked?
Senator, I would have walked out the door.
He's about to bomb a clinic. Here's the thing. The main fight from the right is at this point, we don't want to pay for somebody else's abortion, and we want to curb them at this point.
Sure.
Certainly the most horrific of them. Let's contrast that with the left, whose policy is taxpayer-funded abortion on demand, no questions asked, period. Their recent presidential candidate, and Hillary Clinton, by the way, didn't specify, saying, well, only in the first trimester, a couple of weeks. She believes that the unborn in the United States, basically up until the head leaves the birth canal, have no constitutional rights, period.
I want to ask you about some comments that you made over the weekend on Meet the Press regarding abortion. You said, quote, the unborn person doesn't have constitutional rights. And my question is, at what point does someone have constitutional rights? And are you saying that a child on its due date, just hours before delivery, still has no constitutional rights?
Under our law, that is the case.
I'm an extremist because I think that's
terrible.
bone-chillingly scary. Let's move on to economics. Taxes. Okay? We're the extremists, right? This is what the media says. The right, they've moved so far right. Economically, this wouldn't be a party for
almost like they want us to
Reagan.
flourish.
Yeah. All right, let's talk economics. Let's talk taxes. Okay. On the right, many of us, myself included, want a flat tax. Some people don't see that as extreme. I certainly don't. If you make $100,000, you pay $10,000. You make $1 million, you pay $100,000. That seems fair to me. But let's take that off the table. Okay, let's take the flat tax, the income tax off the table. Let's see if we can find a middle ground. On the right, the extremists that we are, we see that we have the highest corporate tax rate in the entire industrialized world. And we don't want to lower it to the lowest rate. We just want to lower it to a rate that's competitive with your oh-so-beloved socialist European counterparts.
Who are doing well, by the way. Just fantastic.
Yeah.
Things are golden.
It's extreme to want to lower the highest corporate tax rate to a middle level? More extreme than Bernie Sanders being okay with a 90% income tax?
Radical socialist Dwight D. Eisenhower was president. I think the highest marginal tax rate was something like 90.
It was 90. When you think about 90%, you don't think that's obviously too high?
No.
Again,
No, good salad.
this is just a room full of extremists who are being flagged on the terror watch list.
You're right. We want you to keep more of your money. We're jerks.
I know.
Sorry.
They're saying Bernie Sanders is extreme, right? Because he's never been mainstream. Okay. Is it more extreme to want to lower the corporate tax rate or allow people to keep more of what they've earned than Hillary Clinton wanting to raise the estate tax, the death tax, to 65%, which, by the way, is a tax on tax? It's more extreme to believe that you should be able to keep more of what you earn. It's more extreme for people like us, the extreme right-wingers, to believe that we should be competitive with the rest of the industrialized world with our corporate tax rates than it is to want to tax somebody more than half on an already tax. Let's move on to race relations. Conservatives are racist, right? This is the argument. When it comes to race, it's just you're so out of touch, you can't check your privilege. Okay, well, let's get into that. On the right, the extreme view that we have is we want to do away with affirmative action. That's the most extremist view we have. That's what they'll flag us for. Yep, we want to judge people based on the content of their character, as it were. I believe somebody uttered that too. It was probably a member of the Klan.
That's old-fashioned.
Extreme?
Probably a white guy.
Let's take that and contrast that with quotas, segregated graduation and safe spaces, as you see in libraries and Harvard at their graduation now, and even the DNC going as far as supporting a borderline terrorist group in Black Lives Matter. So it's not extreme to support a group, Black Lives Matter, who have been the root cause of many a cop car burning, but it is extreme for us to say, hey, maybe you shouldn't support those people who are burning the cop cars. We want to open a dialogue. Well, do you want to open the carburetor? It's on fire. Climate change. This is the one where we're accused of being extreme all the time. Again, this is for kids who are in college when they talk about right-wing extremists. Let's check all the boxes, and you can send me your tweets at S. Crowder. Most of us on the right, I think most people in this room accept the concept of climate change. I think most of us, if you look at the polls, accept that humans might be a significant contributing factor. Now, we're called extremists or science deniers simply if we don't believe that it's an imminent catastrophe that only the federal government can fix, the same people who run your post office. We're extreme science deniers if we say, you know what, climate change might be happening, humans might be contributing, but I don't think the EPA can fix it. Well, let's contrast that with the left, who they believe in carbon taxes, putting entire industries out of work, proposing the punishment of climate skeptics, as Bernie Sanders and non-scientist guy-in-chief Bill Nye. And we can bring that up. Don't we have his quote from Bernie Sanders?
Yep.
Yeah.
Along with supporting binding resolutions, including things like population control, taken from the one-child policy of China. It's extreme for us to say, I don't think the federal government can solve the problem of SUVs and cow farts, but it's not extreme to be right in line with the policy that led to babies being drowned in Chinese bathtubs.
Ooh.
I know I'm probably out of touch. I don't see the extremism on the right. Guns. This is the one, of course, we're right. Gun-toting rednecks, clinging to your guns and religion. Let's talk about this. Guns. Okay. You're an extremist if you believe that the Second Amendment applies to all law-abiding citizens. If you believe that the Second Amendment is self-explanatory, it applies to all law-abiding citizens, the left considers you an extremist. Let's contrast that with the official dissenting views in the landmark Heller versus D.C. case, where liberals like Justice Stevens argued that actually private citizens have no right to own a firearm whatsoever, even if the purposes are lawful.
Oh, good Lord.
It's extreme for us to say the Second Amendment allows private citizens to have firearms, but it's not extreme for Justice Stevens to have actually said that there is no common law right to self-defense. It's extreme for me to want to carry, if I'm not a criminal. We all support background checks. If you're a felon, if you're a violent criminal, you don't get a gun. That's an extreme point of view, not to say you don't have the right to protect your family. This doesn't even get into the issue of the open borders from the left, the idea that no people are illegal.
Oh, jeez.
Which, of course, is apparently far more moderate than the extreme view of believing that people should come here legally and respect the processes in place, like my mother, who's a legal immigrant and pays taxes as a self-respecting American citizen.
What a
Sucker.
Let's go. And the one that's most important to me, we talk because this is the one that it's easy. They talk about social justice warriors, but they don't really understand the root cause of it. Again, it's all a part of the prism of leftism. Freedom of speech. Here's why you hate fat, landwell, blue-haired feminists, okay? Why am I an extremist? Why is everyone here considered an extremist? What is required to be considered a free speech extremist to the left? Okay, it's simple. Do you believe that the freedom of speech is absolute? Period. Is that it? Do you believe that nonviolent, even offensive speech is absolute? Anyone in this room?
Yeah.
And you believe that's protected by the First Amendment?
Yeah.
According to today's left, you're an extremist.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's more extreme to believe that freedom of speech, even offensive speech, is absolute than it is for 51% of current Democrats to want to ban speech. And many of them even want to go as far as simply banning any anti-Muslim bigotry speech.
Oh, Lord.
And here's the crazy thing, right? I'm an extremist because, well, hold on a second. Let's ask the questions. Who determines what hate speech is?
Exactly.
Who decides what extreme speech is acceptable? And here's something, isn't it funny that we're deemed extremists by the people who conveniently, isn't it convenient for them that to the big government left, that those answers consistently and exclusively lie with those in positions of political power? Because they can't be extremists. Only people like you and I.
It's not possible.
Maybe that's why the official platform of the left. All of this leads to, when we're talking about free speech, it's the First Amendment. How important is it? It's Amendment number 1.
Number 1.
They asked me on
Right
Sky
there.
News one time, why do you think that, why do you believe that the Second Amendment is as important as your right to like freedom of speech or something? Because it's literally right up there with the freedom of speech. You don't even have to
count.
If you're on an iPhone, you don't even have to scroll.
1, 2, stop. There.
They died at like 20 years old back then when we were writing this
Yeah,
stuff, so
that's
they knew they were going to prioritize writing the most important ones first because death could come at any moment.
Number 1, freedom of speech, right? Okay, freedom of religion.
Number 2, shoot that guy that said something wrong.
Number 2, black powder and lead balls. Let's make sure this is right. For
we'll
how many
control the
people?
speech
Everybody.
with that.
If I get to nothing else.
If the guy's packing on the other side of you, probably control your mouth a little bit.
Yeah. And this is why we're seen as extremists for believing this. And maybe this is why all of the things that we've outlined are so considered extreme. This is why the official platform of the left makes it incapable for their members to answer very simple questions on the First Amendment. Let's see.
Will you tell us here today simply?
This is a long clip, I warn you, but it's important.
Will never entertain or advance a proposal that criminalizes speech against any religion.
That seems self-explanatory.
Sir, I want to, as I said before, you referenced as context for your question.
Well, there's
an
no
article
context on this
from-
question. I'm just asking
Well,
you.
there actually
Just
was.
asking you. All right. Let me ask a new question. Will you tell us here today that this administration's Department of Justice will never entertain or advance a proposal that criminalizes speech against any religion?
That seems straightforward again.
Sir,
Well, that's not a hard question. Mr.
Well, actually,
Perez.
it is a hard question in the sense that when you make
It's really not that difficult.
No, I'm
It's not a trick.
asking you here today.
Pretty easy.
You don't
will
need a
tell us
number
here
2
today
pencil and a
that this
Scantron.
Department of Justice will never entertain or advance a proposal to criminalize speech against any religion.
Again, sir, if you have a
He can't do it. He
proposal,
can't do it.
that you are considering,
This is,
we will
Perez, right? Yeah.
Review that proposal.
Okay, here's my
offer
proposal.
our-
Here's my proposal. I'm asking you to answer a question. That's my proposal. I'm
Put
proposing
it in your
that
language.
you answer this question. Will you tell us here today that this administration's Department of Justice will never entertain or advance a proposal that criminalizes speech against any religion?
Again, sir, if you give
All right.
the context
Mr.
of
Chairman,
the question,
would the gentleman yield for a
to
second?
conduct
I will not yield, but I will let.
I
the
think
gentleman-
we can straighten this out.
I will not yield.
I've just been looking for a way to fit that clip in for a long time. So, okay, let me for those who weren't clear on the question, let me crystallize it for you. For the left to believe that you are an extremist, all that is required is someone like that to ask you the question. Hold on a second. Do you promise that you will not sign any bill or support any bill that criminalizes any speech of any kind? If you were elected a representative and you were able to answer that question, yes, I promise I will not ban speech of any kind, you're an extremist. We'll be back with Alex Epstein, author of The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. Extremist! All right, another pogo bump. That's the first time for people who are hearing it on
First
the
time on
YouTube.
Thursdays. Yeah.
Glad to have our next guest on. So he was actually, here's the truth. We were going to have him booked a while back, and then something happened. We are horrible people, and we bumped him, and then we just didn't get back in touch until Patrick Moore, in his interview,
That's right. You
created a memory trigger. We said, well, you know what? Alex Epstein, actually, who wrote The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, was supposed to have a debate regarding climate change, regarding fossil fuels, and the person backed out. So now I've kind of ruined it, but I've ruined the crescendo. But Alex Epstein, author of The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, thanks for being here, brother.
Hey, good to be here.
So what was that Patrick Moore was telling us about? You had a debate scheduled, and then the guy just didn't show up? Fill us in there.
Yeah, so I've done a lot of debates over the years. In 2011, I challenged Greenpeace to a debate, and we actually found someone to debate me. But over the years, and particularly since the book The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels came out, which is pretty effective, I would say, arrogantly, it's been really hard to find people. And we managed to find this guy, Terry Tamminen, who runs the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation. And a big event offered me the opportunity to debate him. And the sole reason I did it is because of the prominence of Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
And then I prepare for it, and then a week in advance, I hear that with no explanation, this guy pulls out, he cited, quote, urgent business, unquote.
Yeah. Maybe he had to go to the bathroom. Did they give you anything else after that?
No, and he wasn't even man enough to come to me himself, which I would obviously do. If, the only reason I would pull out would be, the plague or new case of polio or something like that. So
right.
I got a replacement who was the former governor of Colorado, Bill Ritter. But it just wasn't the same thing. And on top of that, the moderator completely broke the rules to give the other guy way more time to talk. And it was 24 minutes. So it was pretty much a fiasco. But, really.
So we
really
go from arrogant to very humble. We appreciate it.
Well, I'm not saying I'm the sole cause of the fiasco, but it was just, if people want to search Alex Epstein debate on YouTube, you can see some of these debates and you can maybe see why these guys don't want to debate.
Well, sure. Let me ask you. So what kind of things do you debate? Obviously, it's somewhat self-explanatory in your book title, The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. But lay that out for people watching who maybe don't know. We've talked about that on the show quite a bit, having been to the climate summits myself and actually gone out of the nice resorts where they spend time. But you're the expert, Alex.
Yeah, I think it is really important to decide what topic to debate, because I think even in the lead up you mentioned something about climate change. And I think climate change is a very vague term, first of all, but it's the wrong thing to debate because climate change, the actual issue there is CO2 emissions. Does increasing CO2 levels cause some serious problem that offsets the benefits of fossil fuels? So you're dealing with a situation where you have fossil fuels and you have benefits and you have concerns. And whenever you have such a situation, the real issue is overall, is this a good thing or not? It would be just like vaccines. You look at the benefits and you look at the concerns and you try to do so objectively so that you can advance human flourishing as much as possible.
Real quick, let me stop you there. It's a sliding scale, but it's interesting that you say that because, we did go from global warming to climate change. Anytime there is a change, it is important to note on the timeline, it becomes more generalized, as you've said, which makes it less and less possible to debate. So I just think people should note that and be aware of the next iteration of it, but continue.
And in general, just notice when things are precisely defined or not. And also whether people are careful about the magnitude, whether they differentiate between mild and catastrophic. So the analogy I like to use is vaccines. Imagine somebody says to you, well, Stephen, you're in favor of vaccines. Let's say you are. You must be a vaccine side effect denier. Right? Because vaccines have side effects.
Yeah.
So how could you be in favor of them? And you might say, well, I think they have these unique benefits that you can't get from anything else. And I think those outweigh the side effects. Well, it's exactly the same with fossil fuels, right? I assess that the benefits far, far outweigh the side effects. And I precisely look at both. Whereas the opposition, they only look at the negatives and they dramatically exaggerate them. So they have this narrative of, oh, if fossil fuels impact climate at all, that must be a catastrophe, and there's no benefit to offset it.
Right.
So it's just garbage thinking.
Well, you assess both the positives and negatives, and then on the positive sides, from what I've read, you assess not only the moral sort of quandary that they try to present, but also the economic, sort of the technological development. I mean, there are a lot of things to unpack there, where it's not just, hey, this is good or bad for the environment. Like you said, do we know definitively how good or how bad, what the ramifications are, and how does that sort of coincide with what people in third world countries need to advance, to be able to live, to feed themselves? And again, but this just comes from someone who's a generalized climate denier. And by that, I mean, I don't think the EPA can fix man-made climate change if, Florida won't be around in 2 years. That's really all I think.
It's interesting when we talk about this issue of the moral case, why use that term? And the reason I'm using moral is because it's the overarching concept that includes things like economic and environment.
Right.
And the key for me is how I define moral versus how my opponents define moral. Because my standard of morality is what advances human flourishing. And their standard of morality is what minimizes human impact. And if you really want to minimize human impact, we shouldn't have cities, we shouldn't have kids, and we should praise North Korea as a better country than South Korea.
Yes, we should just have no humans. I was at the Cancun Climate Summit when I remember Ted Turner got up and proposed effectively China's one-child policy. We just talked about that. And no one around at the Climate Summit was like, oh my God, this is horrible. He's talking about the policy that led to girls being drowned in bathtubs. Everyone just said, yeah, one child. Let's curb the overpopulation. I mean, talk about immoral. I feel like I'm in Blade Runner.
That's hilarious to me only because when I was a freshman at Duke University, I almost got kicked out of the school because a lecturer came in and started talking about the virtue of China's policies in dehumanizing the planet, and everyone else was nodding. And I somehow ended up giving a speech of my own, and the guy left the room, and I was told that I shouldn't go to Duke anymore if I was going to do this again.
Yes, exactly. Don't you go to Duke, or we'll make up a fake rape story out of you, young Epstein. It was remarkable, the Cancun Climate Summit. The whole message was, it's not that any of us don't care about the environment. We want to pick stuff up. I hate it when I see people littering. It's that we want to see people live. I would kill 1,000 monkeys if it meant saving one human. I know it sounds terrible. It doesn't sound nice, but does this enter the equation with your sort of your opposition? Or do they just say, well, listen, Alex, you also have a moral obligation to, if this does impact the environment, to try and bring us to alternative sources of energy? And I know I've heard that argument from them. What do you say to them? And is there some truth there?
Well, I think the first question you raise has to do with what's the relationship between environment and human well-being. Yeah. And for me, it's a subordinate relationship, which means I want a good environment to advance human flourishing. So I judge environmental impacts as positive or negative based on their impact on humans. So I generally want to minimize pollution, but I'm very pro-development. Okay. Versus the other side, what they want to do is just minimize human impact. And by they, I mean really anyone who holds this idea in any form of minimizing human impact. And if you're optimizing for minimizing human impact, you are going to dehumanize the planet. You're going to take away resources people need to live. You're going to take away their power. You're going to take away their freedom. And that's the direction that we're going. So if we have a pro-human goal, then we will care about our environment. If we have an anti-impact goal, then we'll sacrifice humans to the environment.
It's a very good point. It almost becomes just a reiteration of Gaia. It's basically Mother Earth worship at this point. Yeah. And when I say Gaia, people say, you mean like that message board that used to have all the anime porn? I'm like, no, the internet ruins everything. But how do you balance this? So kind of for people who are listening right now, who were raised in the generation where climate change, global warming / climate change exists, it's man-made, it's catastrophic, we need to fix this. What is the moral case moving forward? What's the balancing act there? I know right now we're dependent on fossil fuels. If Alex Epstein could get the world to listen to him right now, what do we do?
I'd say two things. One is carefully measure positives and negatives, and two is freedom. So carefully measure positives and negatives means if you're talking about the climate impact of CO2 emissions, you want to assess what, if anything, do those CO2 emissions do to the livability of the climate. That's the key idea. If we care about humans, it's about the livability. It's not about change. It's not about warming. Those are derivative ideas. The key is livability. And if you measure this, the livability of the climate since major fossil fuel use began 80 years ago around the world has increased by a factor of 50. So you are 1/50th as likely to die from extreme heat, extreme cold, flood, drought as you were 80 years ago. Now, how can this be possible? It's because there is no Gaia. Nature doesn't give us a safe climate that we make dangerous. It gives us a really dangerous climate that we need to make safe. And technology, industry, all powered by fossil fuels, that's made us almost climate proof. And so the real solution to quote unquote climate change, which would be climate danger, is technology. And guess what? Climate is a problem we've mostly solved. Today, 10 to 30,000 people a year die globally from climate danger. It used to be 3 million to 10 million in a year.
And how do you measure that?
It's pretty straightforward. You just aggregate, you take a bunch of categories. So you take heat-related deaths, from extreme heat, cold. It's much easier to do now than it was in the past. So in the past, they tend to underreport it. But even then, you have years in the 30s where adjusted for population, there were 10 million climate-related deaths a year globally. By today's population today, again, 10 to 30,000. Climate is a naturally caused problem that requires human technology as a solution. The people who are afraid of climate are either disingenuous or they have a primitive pre-technology mindset that tells us that we need to repent for our climate sins instead of conquering nature with technology.
Who wants to get in that confessional booth? It's just Al Gore barefoot. Look through the slots. What were you saying?
It makes a lot of sense, though. Think about the blizzard you talk about in Montreal. Think about how many people probably back then, if they had generators to power their homes, that keep the elderly people keep their breathing machines.
Oh yeah, people died during the ice storm.
Think about all the situations where technology and basic innovation has
We have to
things.
get going, but it's funny that you bring that up because first off, he's the Jeff Goldblum way. He's life finds a way, and I think he's right. But as simple as when I was a kid, we had them come in with their Sesame Street classes and never let the water run because we're losing fresh water. And this was me as a child. Now, I'm not saying that everything I asked was correct, but looking back, it's the mindset that you're pretty much expressing. I remember saying, well, hold on a second, didn't we just learn that the Earth is 70% water? They said, yes, but that's not all fresh water. I said, okay, so it's not, they said, yeah, we're losing fresh water. I said, okay, but do we have some way to desalt the ocean? They said, well, yeah, desalinization, we do, but it's very expensive and it's very difficult to do. I said, okay, but won't that just get better and cheaper? This was me at 7. And they're all, well, never let the water run. They flipped a switch. Never let the water run with the mascots. And I was just supposed to stop asking questions. And again, it comes down to technology. As a kid, I thought, well, it's going to get better. They told me to shut up. So
yeah, I mean, look at how good that philosophy is and how rare it is to just have a pro-human, pro-technology philosophy. The so-called pro-technology environmentalists, their core solution is to withdraw technology, to withdraw consumption, to withdraw prosperity, versus the mentality of, hey, let's use new technology to make things better all the time. So as Joe Rogan put it, we don't have a water problem, we have a salt problem, and we need a technological solution.
Yeah.
Anti-technology, or they are pro spending technology, spending resources in ways that are
well, like Germany. Sven Computer, one of our interns,
Forcing
he's talking in Germany, right? Obviously they had to sell some of their energy at a negative rate when they had a surplus of solar and wind, and then they'd be at a deficit.
Those aren't real. So a technology that's subsidized for ideological reasons is an insult to technology. Technology is that which consumers will buy because it's more advanced when they're on the free market.
That's a good point. Otherwise, if the government were subsidizing phones, this would be my iPhone. Hello, can you hear me now? I don't know. Switch to Sprint. The guy's going to marry a dude. Did you know he's gay, the Verizon guy? Now he marries guys. He does Sprint.
Surprise.
Talk about a brilliant ad campaign. Okay, Alex Epstein, the author of the book, The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. People can buy that on Amazon, right?
Yeah, and to get everything, just go to industrialprogress.com.
Industrialprogress.com, The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. It's very compelling. Alex, brother, we'll have to have you back. But I think, do we have Ben Shapiro coming up?
Ben Shapiro coming up.
Ben Shapiro coming up. We got to go. We got to go. We'll have you back.
All right. Bye, guys.
That was for the fan who loves the Bumble's face. You know who you are.
It's good.
It's a good face. It's a good face.
Good face.
Thank you so much. Ben Shapiro, always fun. Had to cut him off because the guy goes over time. If he were at the Oscars, you would just hear the theme song for half of his speech. You wouldn't hear the second half of his speech.
I'll play the album.
Just play it. I don't know. Find just Hans Zimmer, anything. Play it. This guy just won't shut up. A smart guy. I will say this. Ben Shapiro's, I don't agree with him on everything, but when we're tracking, he goes, yeah, I agree with you. I feel that exactly. I go, oh, okay. Now I don't feel so bad.
It's true. It's true. And you understand why leftists hate him.
Yeah, you understand why leftists hate him. I can't be the only one who's
him.
exasperated with this week. I just wanted it to end. I'm like, I don't want to have to talk about Comey one more time or hear one more screw up. I'm done with it. I'm over it. And as a matter of fact, as far as, we often wrap this up, I feel like I covered most of it earlier with the Extremist segment, but for those asking about it, and it'll probably be cut on its own segment for YouTube as a reference, and we'll have the sources available. It's one of those deals, the whole idea of extremism, that just you're a right-wing extremist, that we've talked about this before. It's just repeated enough where a lot of people believe it. Well, I'm conservative, but I'm not one of those right-wing extremists. Well, I'm conservative, but I'm a compassionate conservative. What does that even mean?
I'm conservative, but I'm reasonable.
Yeah, I'm conservative, but I'm reasonable. And we've been allowed to say, by the way, we will host anybody on here for discussion, for a civil discussion, but I don't think I don't think 90% of the policies proposed by today's regressive left are reasonable. I don't think a 65% death tax is reasonable. I don't think taxpayer-funded abortion on demand up until the head pokes out is reasonable. I don't. And I'll argue those ideas because I think they're so unreasonable. I can argue those ideas in a civil way. That's what's funny. When you have the confidence in the logic of the basis of your ideas, you can argue with someone who you think their ideas are so absurd, and you can be civil because you're not insecure. It's like a woman when they get into a fight with a guy They just go full bore. You ever had that? Well, your sister? Yeah. They don't control themselves. Guys are able to because they're confident in their strength. They kind of, we rib each other, and the women just like they grab your hair and they gouge your eyes, start rubbing your forehead with a cheese grater like it's backyard wrestling. They take it too far because they're not confident in their physical abilities, and they shouldn't be. Women are weak. So it is one of those, it's just repeated enough. And you know what? So you think a flat tax, that's extreme. Why? When someone just acts as though they try and throw away your idea, why is that extreme? Well, we think that America, it's this, like Michael Moore recently and Bernie Sanders echoed it. We like to think it's this pull yourself up by your bootstrap society. That's what these right-wing extremists, well, why? Why is that absurd? Why is it absurd to think that most grown-ass men can pull themselves up by their bootstraps? Kind of like Ben Carson when he said about public housing. He said, well, I think we should help the weakest among us, the disabled, but I don't think that we should make people super comfortable who are able-bodied and capable of finding work. Can you believe Ben Carson said it? Yeah. Yeah, but usually if someone is just trying to poo-poo, try and dismiss an idea, can you believe that? Just think about it for a second, and usually you work through the process, go, this person's trying to pull one over on me. Yeah, I can believe it. The idea is now that we believe to be extreme, the Second Amendment, that you can own and firearms and protect yourself, the idea that you should be an autonomous human being capable of providing for your own family and not suckling at the taxpayer teat, the idea of rugged independence, of freedom of speech, of the idea that you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. These ideas now that we try and paint, or the left tries to paint as extremism, they used to be truths held to be self-evident. Yeah. You could not go back. Even, you know what? I'll be liberal with this. You couldn't even go back to JFK's era, and short of the actual communists who've now hijacked the wing of the Democratic Party, find mainstream Democrats, when JFK was president, who would think that any of these ideas were extremist. So you know what? It's not that bad. Sometimes if someone just says being an extremist is not a bad thing if that's what it boils down to. I get emails all the time like, I'm afraid because they're in the entertainment industry or in college, and I just don't want them to think I'm an extremist. What's so bad? What, people are going to say you're an extremist? They think you're a terrorist because you believe in a flat tax? That an 8-month-old baby has the right to live? I'm okay being an extremist. I don't know, maybe we should get a hashtag going. Extremist? I think everyone in this room is an extremist, and I'm cool with it. I'm no longer going to try and act as though I'm not, because all of these ideas are extreme to the left. Okay, let's go ahead together this next week and be extremists. Just be extreme and be open about your extremism and see how people react. Maybe you'll change a mind or two. If not, they'll probably hate you anyway. You know why? Because they're the real extremists. Also, they suck. They're asses. They are jackasses. See you next week, Monday, for Mug Club members.